I'm from the National Association for Voluntary Community Action, which for those of you who don't know is the kind of national umbrella body for local, what Ursula called infrastructure bodies. So Council Voluntary Service, we've got here Hackney CVS, and Kenton and Chelsea Social Council, which I think is very interesting because I think it's such a posh address, but actually it's rooted from the Notting Hill riots of the 50s. So I think it's very much about social action and not just about a static kind of view of charities, and that's what we represent. And now we have about 400 members across the country, but they serve and support 160,000 local voluntary community groups. So that's our real focus, is the local and smaller voluntary sector. I think I just want to say that I think we've actually got a really strong, we should just recognise this, I think there's a strong sense of community and a tradition of voluntary action in this country which we shouldn't forget. And a thing that really gets my goat, the Prime Minister said just before the Paralympic closing ceremony, he said, you know, we've seen all the wonderful things in the Olympics and the volunteers here and everybody coming together, and sometimes people talk down Britain. I thought, yeah, it was you, broken society, wasn't it? And that really gets my goat, broken society, not because there aren't problems, but because it's a council of despair. And I think, you know, there are 13 million people, estimated 13 million people volunteer in this country on a monthly basis in one form or other, maybe with a church, a trade union, a charity or whatever, but that's millions of people. And what that tells me is, first of all, there are lots of problems out there. Yes, absolutely, but there are lots of people who are willing to try and roll their sleeves up and tackle those problems. So that's the first thing. And it's a very diverse sector, as was said. And I don't apologise for that really, because I know the trade union movement very well, and those of you who are in it know the trade union movement's a very diverse sector as well. So I think that's a good thing, and we can draw strength from that. I want to say, the question's been put, what are the three challenges? And I'll say this very briefly, because a lot of the facts have been given by Ursula. I think, first of all, the cuts, but the cuts at a time, or at the same time as demand rising. And I think we've just got to recognise the cuts are hurting individuals, we all know that. They're hurting them through removal of services, through higher charges, in all sorts of ways, and also the effects of welfare reforms. So I think we've got to recognise that's all happening. So there's a kind of increasing demand at the same time as there's been cut back in resources. Second area is that there's a shake-up of the relationship between the public sector and the voluntary sector, and let's give that a very broad name, which I think it comes under marketisation, and that's the problem area. And third is what I think is the undermining of what I'll call social assets or social infrastructure, the thing that bind us together in local communities. So I think they're the three big challenges. So I'll just make a few remarks because I don't want to repeat what Ursula said, and I don't want to take up too much time. But I just want to say as part of the COX, so we do research on what's happening among our members and among the lots of local organisations, thousands of organisations they represent, and you'll not be surprised to know that the majority of local charities have suffered cuts, and for our members themselves, the kind of umbrella support bodies at local level, I guess if you're from a trade union who don't know it, a bit like a trades council, or if you're from the commercial world, a bit like a chamber of commerce, if you like. So an umbrella body that supports local bodies. So our members have had cuts 20% this last year and 20% the year before. So that's the size of the cuts. I mean, it won't shock people because that's the sort of cuts everybody's been feeling. So, and I think why is that important is because most of those organisations are trying to provide support to the people who are suffering from the welfare reforms and the cuts in services and the squeeze on their living standards through higher charges. The second thing then is about the shape of the relationship, as I say, marketisation. And there's one thing you can see is there's been a massive shift away from local authorities and public authorities supporting charitable work or voluntary work through grants. So we'll give you a grant to do X, Y, and Z. You've got to still do that. You're accountable, but turning them into contracts with competitive bids and often payment by results. And these are all parts of marketisation. I'm not saying there's no place for any of those things, but I'm just saying it's got completely out of whack. And if I give you the example of the work programme, which is something I get very hot under the collar about, ministers said that they produced the work programme, and we all want to help people who are out of work back into work, so yeah, that's a good thing. Then they said, we think that about 40% of the provision to help people get ready to go back to work will be among local voluntary groups and community groups. And then what they did is they said, well, how are we going to divide up the contract? They divided it up into 20 massive contracts. They asked for millions of pounds on the table as collateral. So of course, only the A4Es of this world could even stand a chance of doing that. And that left the voluntary groups and the charities as kind of dependent subcontractors of these, what they call prime providers. And then what's happened is they do get a premium to help people who are, I think everybody knows, who are harder to, further away from the labour market, they say. They need more work and more help to get back into work readiness. So for those people, there's a premium from the government. But after they signed the contract, unemployment went up, so it got a bit harder. So it's very hard to find out exactly what's happening because it's much more secretive because they're private companies, so they're not subject to freedom of information as if it was public. But it seems to me there are two great dangers. One is we know that a lot of the charities and voluntary groups and community groups they signed up, they're just left hanging. And some of them invested a lot of money into it, and some of them have now gone bust as charities and as voluntary organisations, as has been exposed this week. And I think that's a disgrace. But what's a bigger disgrace is what I also suspect, and that's what was referred to as being used as big candy. You take them along to try and impress the people, to get the ministers to get the contract, then you really don't want to know them. The second thing is, though, and I think much worse really, is I think that people who are harder to place, harder to get back to the labour market, so you have to spend more resources to help people, those people, I feel there's a great danger they're just being parked. And at the end of the day, they're weighing up, we're going to get this extra premium, but how much extra are we going to have to spend to get those people back? And I'm sure at the margins what they're doing is saying, well, we'll say at the end of this, we got all the easy people back, we'll have the money for that. Sorry, we didn't manage to place these people, so we'll not get the extra premium, and they probably will be spending less. So that's what I think is the great disgrace. It's letting down charities, but okay, but it's letting down the unemployed people. That's the real disgrace of this. So that's the way those contracts are working. Payment by results is, if you're being asked to say, what are your income streams going to be in 5, 10, 20 years? Any of you who are involved in voluntary organisations or charity, except the very biggest, you can't guarantee that sort of income. So how on earth can you try and take part in a contract like that? So the third area, the third big threat, which I think is a bit more unseen and less well observed, is the undermining of social infrastructure. But what do I mean by that? Social assets. So I mean by that people, relationships, networks, sometimes places, sometimes community centres and buildings, and actually organisations like voluntary and community groups themselves are all being undermined by all of this process at a time of greatest need. And I think there's been a recognition, increasing recognition that for the economy you need to have infrastructure, don't you? They're all saying we've got to have roads and rail and communications and skills even is being thought as part of the infrastructure. But when it comes to social infrastructure, what keeps societies together and local communities together, I think there's a real threat in many places. So let me just turn to the final part, which is exploring some of the ways we can deal with these problems. I think one thing we can do is we can expose the facts. So Joseph Rowntree Trust, for example, was very instrumental in exposing the facts on child poverty and therefore getting some action on it. Disability charities representing disabled people have been at the forefront of exposing some of the horrors associated with the new assessments for disabled people's benefits. And Mind's one of those organisations, but there are others as well. Second, we can provide practical support for people in need, and many charities do. And we can be very innovative in that. And I think actually there's a lot to be said for early intervention. I just want to draw attention to one group, Home Start, and they basically get volunteer parents, often who've been the recipients of their services, and they put them in touch of usually young mothers who have got real problems having a child for the first time, big social problems to deal with, and they just put them together and try and deal with the whole range of problems that they're dealing with. And this isn't somebody from the authorities, and it's not somebody, you know, who's an official in a uniform. This is someone like them. That's what's really fantastic about it, and they get great results in improving the chances of young people and actually improving the ability to cope of mainly young mothers. So I think that type of early intervention is what, and innovation is what the voluntary sector is very good at, and it absolutely saves great problems later on and probably saves great costs later on. And thirdly, our members build the confidence and capacity of community groups. And you know, it's a very unfashionable thing in government circles, and I think increasingly in big lottery circles, to think, why would you support people and there isn't an end result that we can put in a picture, that we can show in a pamphlet, but it's about having the infrastructure there to support people. You mentioned, you know, I don't know if people realise, but 75 to 80% of charities, and that's just charities, don't get any public funding support at all. But one of the reasons they can survive is they get help from organisations like Kensington and Chelsea Social Action, who will help them get set up, help them deal with the Charity Commission, deal with, you know, accounts and all of that sort of thing, and train them and put them together with people so they can be effective. So I think we should just not lose sight of the importance of that support mechanism. So just finally then, I want to talk about us working together, trade unions and the voluntary and community sector working together. Now, many years ago in the early 90s, and I was at the Transport and General Workers Union for about 18 years, and I actually was part of did a pamphlet called Trade Unions in the Community, because we set up business in the community, and Bill Morris, who's the General Secretary, was very keen on this, and he said, look, we can't just stop at the factory gate or the office door or the shop door. We've got to be trade unions back involved in our communities, which actually I think a lot of the traditions of trade unions are like that. And when we talk about volunteers, unions are voluntary organisations actually, and they're run by volunteers, shop stewards, elected people, or apprentices who spare their own time to do that. So I think we have a lot in common, and I think we have a lot of values in common. I think the values of social justice, the values of coming together to act together for the common good, they're really things that bring us together. And I also, at that time, the other thing we did is we worked with a whole group of voluntary organisations and produced a book, perhaps a fancy phrase for it, but a big pamphlet called In Place of Fear, which was about defence of the welfare state in the early 90s. And it's opened my eyes really, I think, working together like that, and it was quite a new thing, working together like that across between voluntary organisations, charities, trade unions. First of all, I found that there's no monopoly of wisdom. There's no monopoly of wisdom. Everybody's got something to bring to the table. And if we concentrate on what we share and the common values we've got, the common aims we've got, and if we work together, then we'll do a better job serving the people we want to serve, who are under such pressure at the moment, and that's the people out there who are suffering from the effects of the welfare reforms and everything else. So I just want to leave it at that, and what I'd like to explore today is where can we come together practically. We've all got our different parts to play. Not everybody will be at the barricades, and some people will be doing more of the campaigning through exposing things and so on. But between the lot of us, hopefully we can all play our part in serving all those people better who need help, and build practical alliances at local level, at community level, which I'm very keen on. So let's not forget that. That's where a lot of the alliances need to be built, but also at national level, so we can actually move forward with the cause of social justice and helping the people who are there to help. So thanks very much.